There it is.
There we go. Hey everyone, I'm Coach Loretta. We're here with the Dirt Trail Running Podcast. I'm here with Coach Lindsay today. As you can see, Coach Reese is away. So, the boys are away, the girls are going to play. So I invited Lindsay on so we could talk about her last two epic races. She recently ran Badwater 135 for the second time and completed Angeles Crest for the I don't even know how many times. You've done that a few
Second
times.
time.
Second
Second
time.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about that today. I'm looking a little red because I just got in from a nice run, a great hill workout. So feeling pretty good about that. And we've been working really hard on finishing our sprinter van, turning it into a camper van. So can't wait to have that done and hoping to head for Colorado next week. So things are busy here. So what about you, Lindsay? How are things going?
I have been sleeping a ton and trying to get off of my feet as much as I can in the last, oh my gosh, since I ran Badwater about 2 weeks ago. And then, I knew I had Badwater and Angeles Crest. I think it was 9 days after Badwater that I finished Badwater that I had to run Angeles Crest. And I did this exact same combo 2 years ago. So I know how painful it was. So, I think once you've done it once, it kind of like magnifies it in your mind of like what you actually have to do. But Angeles Crest gets canceled a decent amount. It's right here in our mountains in LA because of the snowfall that happens and mudslides and rock slides that shut down the roads that you can't even get to the race. So they can't set up anything. They can't like have emergency services out there. So I was actually signed up last year, but it got canceled. So I was like, okay, Badwater Angeles Crest level coming up again.
Oh, that's great. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Badwater or
Yeah, let's start with Badwater, just because that was Badwater was kind of my A race with Angeles Crest, just being let's get through this. Like that's just going to be a rough one. But for Badwater this year, so the first year I ran Badwater, I was incredibly trained. I was probably training the most I'd ever trained in my life or something. And the race just ended up being a stuffer fest. Like my body was so broken down. I finished, but not in the time that I wanted to. And I had like injury after injury, like, Achilles, back, like my back completely went out. My ankle went out. My Achilles was out. So I had to just, suffer through it 2 years ago. So this year I completely changed my kind of training approach, and it doesn't work for everybody, but I dialed back my training. I know I can handle these tough races. So I just kind of way dialed back what I was actually doing. I was running more frequently, but my mileage was much uh, less high. Like I was topping out, I think I ran like 1 15 miler on the trail like 2 weeks
wow.
before Badwater. But I'd also had a rib injury from my last set of races. So I didn't even really tell anyone about it. But those close to me knew that I could not even like breathe or sit down without my rib just, I mean, it was awful. I think what I had done was I pulled the cartilage off the bone on a fall, and then it was just getting progressively worse. So I was like, I don't even know if I can like show up to Badwater. Like this is gonna be another like just terrible, suffer fest. But somehow I just had the most beautiful, perfect race, and I did the first 100 miles in a sub 24 pace. I did it in 23:30, which you climb two huge mountain ranges. You start at 10 p.m. It was 120 degrees, like you're running all through the night and then through the day. So I was really, really pleased with that sub 24-hour 100 to start off Badwater. But then, let's see, miles 90 through 120 are the worst part of that race. They're flat-ish, but they are just so desolate, and everyone hates that part of the race. You just feel like you're running on Mars and there's nothing around. And you usually go through there. When I went through and it's pitch black, you can't see anything. So that was kind of where I had to like dial in my brain. And then once you get to Lone Pine and then you start to climb, yeah, this race is sadistic. You have to climb up a 5,000 foot mountain road that leads to Whitney Portal, and it's 13 miles with 5,000 feet of climb to end this epic race. So once I got there, I was like, okay, I'm home free to stay moving. I couldn't move like super well, but I was able to push up the mountain, and I had a 5 hour PR there. So I was incredibly happy. Sixth female and 16th overall. So I got top 20, which was the goal to begin with. So I knocked off every goal that I had for that race and felt absolutely incredible the whole time.
That's amazing. So what was the weather like? I think I was hearing that it was supposed to be
Ugh.
more than usually hotter.
It was so it didn't reach like the peak of what it did. Like I think even the last time I did it, but it was 120 when I started at 10 p.m. So that was, and it got up to 122, which is insane. But for the first time, like in most people's memory, and I think it's only happened one other time, there was flash floods at the start, and
Wow.
it it caused the humidity to go way up. So even when you add a little bit of humidity to the desert, it like if you look at a chart, like it'll make 120 feel like 160. Like it's something stupid.
Crazy.
And there was, there was storms. Thankfully I only got rained on like once through the night, I believe. And it was, hot rain. It wasn't bad, but it also caused like crazy, like there's this video, I'm going to the start line and you have to drive the course to get to the start line. And it's just this massive like dust storm and it's like 40-mile-an-hour winds. And they start by waves. So the 8 p.m. wave had to run through a lot of that. So they're just like head down, like tucked in. By the time I started, most of that, I mean, it was still windy and dusty. But for the most part, I didn't have to deal with that. But the weather was hot and humid, which I think took a lot of people out. Like there were some really good veterans that dropped that no one would think that they would ever drop, or that had that they timed out at the 50-mile cutoff. The 50-mile cutoff there is extremely hard for no matter what wave that you're in, but it gets harder as the later that you start. So you have 8, 9, and 10 p.m.
Okay.
And everyone has to be to the 50-mile, 50.8, so 51 miles in by 10 a.m. the next day. So, and then when you're in that kind of heat, you never know what's gonna happen. So I had 12 hours to get 51 miles,
Nice.
and I did it by like an hour and a half. But still, like you never know what's gonna happen when you're running in 120 degrees
Right,
and you're
right,
running overnight, and yeah, it's crazy.
right. So how do they decide the waves? 'Cause I was noticing that there were different waves and I was wondering how that was decided. And
It's
I was
the
watching the tracker feverishly and I was like, how do I know if they're competing against each other since they're in different waves? So I wasn't quite sure how to even describe
yeah.
it.
The 8 p.m. is he calls it the fast wave, the faster wave, and the fastest wave. So
Okay,
nobody's slow out there, but people
right.
that need a little extra time to make the 50-mile cutoff or put in the
I
8
see.
p.m. wave. But it's the curse and the blessing of having some fast 100 times will land you in the last wave.
Right.
I would love to be in that middle wave just to kind of have a little extra, but the last wave is where I've been the last 2 years, which there's also some prestige of being in there, and you're around there with who's going to win the race likely, so
Right.
it's kind of fun. Yeah,
Right. Well, that's cool. So, I
yeah,
want to talk a little bit about the heat. So, it's been something that's been a hot topic for athletes that we're coaching too, right? Because the weather has been
yeah.
hot, I think, across the U.S. with a lot of
Uh,
high humidity. And
right.
I get people feeling discouraged with how their training runs are going or how their races are going, and they're doing it in weather that's
Yeah,
really hot and humid.
yeah,
So I've been, sending some of my athletes charts to like calculate like the difference of like
yeah.
if it were 55 degrees, the ideal temperature versus it's 90,
Right.
100% humidity, your performance.
Yeah,
Do you
it's
think
gonna
about that
be
at all?
way
Because it
different.
does. I mean, like if you did a sub 24 there in those kind of conditions, that like really
Hmm.
says a lot about like what could your time be if it was 55 degrees there. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, and I guess with Badwater, because it's a race, you're just going and you know that you have to make these cutoffs. So you're not, you have to put all that out of your mind. Like you have to almost stop thinking about how hot it is. But when I'm training athletes, like it's been brutal for everyone, like whether you live on the West Coast or like, in the Midwest or even the
Mhm.
East Coast. It's been like brutal across the board. But I try and tell people like, let's go by effort here. Like I might have told you a 10-minute pace, but if it's 80, 90, 100 degrees, you like just go by effort. Like I don't care what you do really, because just being out there, you're getting so much more benefit than if you were to be out there in 40 degrees if we're, doing some heat work. But yeah, I mean, I think like I'm sure the charts say, specifics, but my immediate thought is go at least 30 seconds slower per mile and
Right.
start there. Like that's like minimum for me. I'm like, okay, I'll start there. And I do that with my like training, but as far as Badwater goes, I didn't even like look at my pace. Like my goal was to stay in the like tens and the 11s, but that's not my natural running pace. So I was, cranking off a lot of nines, but again, go by feel. If I was feeling okay, then I was going to go for it because I knew I had to climb up two different mountain ranges in that first 100 miles. So I was like, my time will slow down there. It's fine. But
Right.
there's this one extreme, the hottest part of the course is called Panamint Springs, and you do this wonderful 13-mile downhill to get to it. And then it's like the base of like hell that you go through. And it's so hot. But if anyone's seen my videos, that's where all the fighter jets come down and they
Oh
practice
yeah.
above us. It is so cool. And me and Nikki, a girl that I coached, was pacing me, got the ultimate pleasure of like being like nearly scalped from like in a fighter jet twice. It was so cool, and it just kind of made that part of the race like a little extra special. But that part of the race nearly killed me last time. Like my crew put a thermometer on the ground, and it was over 200 degrees last time.
Dang.
Like you go through that, and like my goal this year was like get to that part of the race before like it gets extreme, like because it'll get the hottest there like around 3 to 4 p.m., which is where I hit it last time. And this time I hit it like, I don't know, like 9 or 10 a.m. And it was brutal, but it wasn't nearly as like just soul wrenching. Like last time I had blisters all up my legs from the heat coming off the pavement. This year I felt like my legs were on fire, but at least I was able to like move through it a little bit better.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Oh,
crazy. So, I mean, it's a kind
yeah.
of same concept though. I mean, you're in a race that is going to be hot. I mean, that's what you pay for, right? To do this
Right. Yeah.
extremely hot, challenging race. But you're still
Yeah.
going by effort. And I think that's the same thing we got our athletes when they're doing a race that
Hmm.
happens to be hot that maybe they didn't expect would be hot
Yeah.
or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
I've been telling, I had a couple of athletes do some 50-mile races, and we talked about,
Hmm.
may not be a PR day, like you need
Yeah.
go by effort, not so much by
Yeah.
pace, because we can't control some of those things that, it increases
Yeah.
heart rate, all of those
Yeah.
happening, dehydration and,
It's dangerous. Yeah. It can really go left pretty quick, and then your race is done, before you can even get a couple miles in.
exactly.
And I try to tell people too, like that I'm coaching, everyone's on that same playing field. It's not like you're just dealing with the heat. Like the best runner out there is still dealing with the effects of the heat. And some people deal with it better, some people don't, but everyone's on the same playing field and everyone's got to go by effort. So if you can outsmart it and not listen to your pace, you probably are going to do much better than you think that you are.
Yeah.
But I mean, keeping your core as full as you can is just everything, as you know, like you've got to try and keep your core full. And if you're, pushing your pace way too much early, that's like that is asking for it to be an early in the race.
Right, I agree. And that's the other thing, cooling. Cooling is huge, right? So
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm finding the athletes that really listen to thinking about cooling strategies are doing so much better, handling it so much
Yeah.
better in races. And they're noticing that with their competitors that aren't icing as
Yeah.
much better they're feeling. What did you do for Badwater as far as what's your cooling strategy out there? How are you staying cold or cool?
So for Badwater, you've kind of got the ideal setup. Your crew can meet you every half mile if you want them to. I have them meet me every 2 miles. And for the first 42 miles, you can't run with any of your pacers, but after 42, you can run with them. So I have to carry, all my own stuff until then. But then after that, they can carry your bottles. So I would, of course, have like my ice in my bottle, and I like stress how important it was to my crew. Like, do not ice this until you see me right here because like it'll melt in the time that you get it to me. And I
Right.
just need a couple seconds of cool ice is all that you need. But I think the biggest hack of being a female is to be able to wear a sports bra because I stuff that thing with ice and having it next to your heart is like, oh, it's such a hack. I do it all the time. And you just have to make sure I wear like KT tape to prevent chafing, but I like stuff my bra full of just ice, and that keeps me so cool. I wear arm sleeves and I put ice in them, and that's also a great like lymph point to have to cool your system. I had an ice hat, which is helpful. You want to like drench your body as much as you can without causing chafing. So I like lean over and have my crew like drench me, but I keep my feet and like my lower body clear because we don't want to start dealing with chafing because that's a disaster.
Right.
But every 2 miles I was getting iced down, and I think that that's just like the biggest help that you can have. But there's been many times in my life, because I love heat running, that I've ran in the heat, and then you can kind of go into, a heat exhaustion or heat stroke where you're, starting to feel too cold from the ice. So you've really got to be like on top of it. There's been many times where I'll be, finishing a run in 100 degrees and I'm shivering and I'm like, okay, bad sign. Like let's kind
Right.
of let's figure this out. But thankfully none of that happens at Badwater. But you just have to be super in tune with like your hydrating is a huge key, making sure you're getting your electrolytes, because if you're just drinking your water, that's going to not cool you. You've got to be sure that you're drinking enough calories and all of that. So, but I think icing every 2 miles is, I mean, you would be shocked at the amount of ice one runner can go through out
Yeah,
there.
imagine. That's crazy. You also mentioned
Yeah.
the dust, so I was at Cocodona. There was a lot of people
Mhm.
having, I don't know what they called it, like the Cocodona hack or something. There's like
Yeah.
the dust, and Tahoe was the
Yeah.
same way this year.
Same.
A
Yeah.
lot of dust and people having
Yeah.
coughing. How did you
Yeah.
how did you handle that? Did you wear a buff?
Uh,
What did you do?
I did have like, the cooling bandana too. I forgot to mention that. But I get it so bad, and I still got it from the mountains. I just call it like my runner's cough. I get it every time I'm at altitude, or just outside and it's dusty. Sometimes like through that Panamint Spring area that's really hot, I'll put like a buff over my face, and then I'll wet the buff to kind of cool your face. But yeah, it's that needs to be studied more, because I get it every single time. Some people don't, but I feel like I've literally got like pneumonia or the flu, and I've got to like
Right.
hack my lungs out. I didn't get it until later into Badwater, but I got it like in the mountains this last weekend, and I'm still kind of like, dealing with it a little bit. But
Mhm.
if you feel like there's just the weirdest like sensation of like can't get it out of your chest, and I want to like, I just thought it was me, and then everyone's like, oh no, I get that too. I'm like, okay, good. I think
Yeah,
and then those of us susceptible to allergies too. I mean, you're running outside in the wind and the dust. I think it's just a recipe for disaster out there. But yeah, having a buff, like a wet buff if it's a dusty place, is helpful to put over your face. I've done that many times as well.
right. Nice. And then I
Mhm.
want to go way back to the beginning conversation and where you
Mhm.
talked about, your volume being much less going into this
Mhm.
race and how it's so individualized to people, right? I think
Yeah.
sometimes if you start looking on the internet and you're trying to find a training plan, you're going to see typically a lot of more higher volume to build up to these,
Yeah.
right? And so I think
Yeah.
um, you brought up a really good point because I believe there's a difference in the need for training for these big races, physical versus psychological adaptation,
Yeah.
right? So, you've
Yeah.
so many of these big events. I mean, you've done over 100,
Yeah.
26 miles plus races, right?
Yeah.
And so mentally, you can finish these. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think like when we're working with somebody that's a first timer, going to do a bigger race, then they might need a
Yeah.
little bit more just mentally to mentally
Yeah.
prepare themselves. And that's what I talk to my athletes a lot about when we're talking about having a extra long run or back-to-back long runs. To me, it's more
Yeah.
um, psychological than physiological adaptation.
Absolutely.
What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
I think that is spot on. Like, and you notice it like with my more seasoned athletes that we've taken, for a few years, I can now kind of have them free, not free reign, but give them a little bit more option of like, do you want to dial, like, how are you feeling? Like, maybe we can dial it down before the race. Like, are you having any sort of little issues we need to talk about? And maybe we can dial them back. But yeah, like for me, I know I can handle these things. And that's like the whole part of it, is knowing the confidence in yourself that you can handle 100 miles or 26 miles or a 5K or whatever it is. And knowing that your body is in a position to handle it, and your mind, because that's huge, versus someone that's newer to the sport and that really needs that confidence of the 30-mile long run before a 50 or something similar. And it's such a fine balance, because running those huge numbers for the average person is just, it's very, very difficult, especially when you've got life and kids, and a lot of people's jobs are not sedentary, they're active jobs, and allowing for that recovery is big too. So I always want to find that like that sweet spot of like, you know, making sure that they can handle it. And then there's like the other side of things where I know they can handle it, but I still have to give them those big numbers because they're not sure about it yet.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah.
so
No, because I
sometimes
think
those, yeah,
yeah, I think it's just so much we see in the ultra world, right? That's what you have to do is all of the
yeah,
30 milers and the 30/20s, the back to backs.
yeah,
But there's so many other ways to approach these races. And I think we're starting to see
yeah,
that more with the elites too. When you start looking at people that are sharing what they're doing for training. I think I read recently
yeah,
like Courtney training for, I think it was UTMB. She didn't run anything over 2.5 or 3 hours for long.
yeah,
So I think that it's starting to change and evolve. Of course, when we look at the elites, we know they're training a lot more too. So they may be doing a couple
right,
couple day or times a day of running,
yeah,
but they're still not doing the extra long time because, like you said, it's like this very fine line of risk versus reward. So
yeah,
it's just something I think is interesting because when I
it
get new
is.
that are training for something big, um, it's just in their mind that that's what they have to do. And when I'm starting to get
Yeah.
that I don't think that's what you need, it's a little hard to change mindset. So
Yeah, it completely is. And I get it. Like when I did my first 50 miler, my friend Adam coached me and I believe we did a 30/20. And it, and for me, I needed that. Like if I didn't do that,
yes,
I was not
yes,
going to make it through that 50. And to be honest, you couldn't pay me to run 30 miles and 20 miles day after day outside of a race right now. Like there's just no way. Like
right,
I just
right,
couldn't.
yeah.
My body would be like, I'm done. But I also have a physical job as well. I'm a massage therapist, and I'm on my feet all day, so I have to be super careful. But yeah, your body kind of adapts and changes over time, and I noticed that with my athletes, and like you can see when it clicks and they get that confidence, and they're like, I know I can handle this. Let's do it
Right.
safe, and let's not overdo it. Let's not get junk miles. Let's really make it count here.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. So, well,
Mhm.
congratulations on your finish at Badwater. Will you
Thank
go
you.
again?
I will. I think I'll always kind of have it as something I want to do and I know I can do even better. There's a number I'm chasing, that I know I can do that, might take a couple years. I don't know that I'll do it every year. I really love crewing and I've got like crewing is the most fun out there and it's kind of stress free and I've kind of got like a wonderful running community there. So I might wait a year or two, but I plan on like just kind of stacking up some bad water finishes if I feel the need to. I love that race.
Right. So then, not even 2 weeks after Badwater, you take
Yeah.
on and
Uh,
Angeles. Is it how do you say it?
Angeles Crest, yeah.
Angeles Crest. And
Yeah.
again, I think we should talk about that in a second. When I get athletes coming in and they're wanting to do a lot of back to back, like
Yeah.
100, especially as a newer
Maybe,
to
yeah.
hundreds, it's really risky, I think. I mean,
It is.
it's
It
hard
is
to do
hard.
like back within a couple of weeks. I mean, we
Yeah.
know, our body doesn't completely get back to normal for probably 4 to 6 weeks
No.
after one of these great big events. But
Yeah.
as you mentioned before, I think the more that we do, and you've done so many, our body starts to make adaptations, and so it's
Hmm.
a bit more achievable for you
Yeah.
to do. I'm not sure I could go back and do it that closely together. But
Yeah.
anyway, so talk about that. Like, how did you feel after Badwater, and how recovered were you going into the next race? I mean, I think for me,
Yeah.
when I think about you doing it, I think about not the physical, the mental piece going. You
Yeah.
have to do
Yeah.
that again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thankfully for me, I'd done it 2 years ago. So I knew kind of that I could do it. And I think 2 years ago, I think I had 14 days in between. So this was like a little shorter. But the good news is I felt fantastic at Badwater. There's like little things like the last couple miles at Badwater, my IT band started to really bother me, like where it connects to the knee. And being a massage therapist, I know what that is. I know I'm not tearing anything. I know it's just IT band syndrome. I've been out here forever. I'm running on a road that's slanted. So I just ignored it and said we'll deal with that later. And then my number one issue is always going to be my feet. I've got them dialed down much better, but you can't prevent all blisters at Badwater. You just can't. You're running on pavement that's over 200 degrees. It's not happening. So I did have a blister on my left foot because again, the road, you're hitting your left harder because the road was like this for the majority of the race. So I literally did not run a single step. Everyone's like, are you going to do a shakeout run? Like anything? I'm like, no, like I know I can run. I don't need to prove I can run a mile. Like I just need to stay off my feet. But going into Angeles Crest, I knew I had those two issues. So I just slept as much as I possibly could, let my body do its thing. I didn't mess with my foot at all, but it was still, the skin wasn't healed up on my left foot. So, and then my IT band, I could feel it when I was walking. So I was like, this is either gonna like loosen way up or it's gonna take me out. But I know that I'm not like tearing a meniscus or something. I know it's just pulling. So I'm just gonna let it do what it's gonna do. So I start Angeles Crest. And so a little background on Angeles Crest. It's one of the oldest hundreds. It's like not as old as Western, but it was around that similar time frame. And the same guys have been running it forever. And it's like it's got almost 20,000 feet of climb. It's all through the Los Angeles mountains. It's a point to point race. It's like iconic, so much fun. Um, but you deal with altitude too. You go up to about 10,000 feet for one of the peaks that you climb. So we start the race, and my foot feels fine, like the blister part. And that's what I'd kind of been prepping for. I was like, I need to figure out because blisters are such a small thing, but they are so mentally hard to get through. And that was my goal this time. I was like, forget about your foot. Like it's gonna hurt. Just forget about it. Like, just get it out of your mind. It's going to just be brutal. It's gonna open up at some point. So my foot was okay for a while. I changed my socks maybe 3 times during the race, but almost immediately I could feel my knee like it's a weird buckling feeling. I could feel the IT band starting to pull. But thankfully, on a trail, you're going up and down and you're getting that undulating. If it was on a road, I think it would have been immediate. So about mile 26, we do go on a road for about almost 7 miles. It's a long road section that you have to get to the other part of the trail. And I could like, oh my gosh, I was getting really terrified. I was like, this knee is not good. Like this might take me out if I don't figure out something. But I had seen one of my friends who was crewing another runner, and he always wears a knee brace. And so I see him when I get to the end of this road section, and I go, Bert, do you have a knee brace? And he goes, yeah. So he like sprints to his car. And thankfully, like we were the same size. He's like, it might be a little like big. I was like, no, my legs are swollen. Like, give me that. And I put it on, and it was truly a lifesaver. Like I could not have run another step without it. And I was able to make it probably about till mile 80 before it got really bad. So the last 20 miles were absolutely brutal going downhill. But I made it, and I kind of knew what was going on. So I did typically probably wouldn't tell people to run with that kind of knee pain, finish 100 with it. But I knew it wasn't meniscus or ACL or anything like that. I knew it was just this stupid IT band pulling, and it just feels a lot more intense than what's actually happening. So yeah, I made it through it, and that knee brace was a lifesaver. But I had major foot stuff going on, and I was telling you before we started, I went to the doctor, and that's is actually infected in my foot, so I have to be on 2 antibiotics and like an antifungal, but it'll be fine. But the blister, you go through this race, you go through so many water crossings. You're out there for 30 plus hours. Like if you have any sort of open wound, it's probably going to get pretty gnarly. So,
Right.
but I was telling you as well, I'm so susceptible to any sort. We have poison oak out here, but as a kid, I was covered in poison ivy in Texas. I'm so susceptible to it. I'm covered like head to toe in poison oak and like this poodle dog bush that grows at mountain elevation. And I'm pretty beat up, but we got through both of them. And I had a really fantastic race. And up until like the last 20 miles, I had I think I was fourth through the last 20 miles, and I ended up sixth as well there, which is fine. I just wanted to finish. Like I just wanted to get through it. But I would love to do that race on fresh legs because I really think it's kind of tailored for me. Like I love climbing, and I love, the mountains, and I would love to see what I could do if I hadn't ran 135 miles before it.
Right. So close.
You
Yeah, for
know,
sure. Nice. And I mean, I think
yeah.
that's something we have to consider, right? When we do decide to do something that close together, we have to just,
Yeah.
one is going to be just get out there and finish, and maybe the other is
Yeah.
your A race, but you can't count on
Exactly.
both of them to be your very best because it's just
No, you can't. You can't. You just have to take it as what it is. And for me, it was just a really fun day in the mountains, and I ended up running the majority of it much better than I thought I would. Like I did not think that the knee was going to get any better, and that brace really helped it for a long time
Mhm.
until my body was just like no.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the elevation. A lot
Mhm.
of the athletes we coach live in the Midwest, and so they're
Yeah.
not, they're like at sea level or just slightly above sea.
Yeah.
And we have athletes that are going out to mountain races, and I'm having athletes ask me about that a lot, like how soon should I get there? Should I get there
Yeah.
2 days before? And we talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit. From the research I've read, it's more like the day before, like within 24 hours before is the very best, unless you can go two or
Yeah.
3 weeks earlier and acclimate.
Yeah.
You are already in that situation where you're actually practicing at elevation, right? Where you live.
Yeah. Thankfully, I can go to mountains. Like I live at sea level or very close to it, but I can drive 30 minutes and I've got a 10,000 uh, peak close by.
Right.
So like for me, and this is where I wish, race directors would kind of understand this too, is because even like at Leadville, which starts at 10 and goes up to 12, you never go below 10. You have to be there so far ahead to like do pre-race check-in, your meetings, mandatory things that you can't just show up for the race and check in.
Right.
So I had to go to Leadville in like a 3 to 4 day window,
Mhm.
which is not ideal. You kind of want
Right.
to be in a less window than that. But yeah, like I've done all of my mountain races, just relying on my training from them. But yeah, I know that like the good part about like to show up to a mountain race is to do it right before, but they've really made it hard, was what I found. They've made it almost difficult to do that because they want you to check in early. They
That's
want you to
interesting. Yeah. Another
do
another
all these things.
yeah.
Yeah, because we had our Leadville meeting like the morning the day before the race. So you had to be there 2 days before the race.
Right, right.
And then, yeah, most people try. Yeah, it makes it really hard to just slide in there and get your bib and, and start
Exactly.
running.
Yeah.
But for me, I found that my body adapted to that just fine. Like you get there and you're like, oh gosh, I can't breathe. Like your stomach's a little off. But within like a day, everything kind of stabilized for me and I was okay. But I know the science says like might not always happen like that. So
Right,
thankfully, I've never had an issue with it. But I know a lot of people really do, but yeah,
right.
so people training in the Midwest, like, I mean, we're constantly getting them the best solution, take a trip, go experience it, go experience
Right.
the mountains. If we can't, we've got to get you on Stairmaster, treadmill. And from what, the training that we've done as far as coaches, the best thing you can do is to be in the best physical shape
Mhm.
possible.
Yeah.
And that's kind of your secret. Like, I don't know that these thousands of dollars worth of hyperbaric chambers are really, really the answer. I think as long as you can just make sure your cardio is the best it can possibly be, I think that that's like your secret sauce.
That's exactly what I tell athletes. I'm like, we're going to get you in
Mhm.
the best shape we can, so you can do the
Yeah,
best that you can with that. And if I do
yeah,
have athletes that have some availability of a sauna, then I will,
sauna,
do
yeah,
spend a little bit of time in the sauna just to help with that adaptation too. So, but
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's all you can do. Like you do it with, the best, and again, know that 99% of people don't live in where the race is.
right.
Like a lot of people that do these crazy mountain races, it's a dream of theirs. They're coming from everywhere. They're not coming from the luxury of living in Colorado or the
Right.
luxury of even living in LA where I can go get it if I need to. So yeah, I mean, even myself, I was still only getting exposure like once every week or two to
Mhm.
10,000. I can go up to Mount like Whitney, but that's like a bigger day trip that, I wasn't
Right.
able to do before Leadville. So I just relied on pushing my lungs at 10,000 feet as best as
Right.
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, when you did Angeles Crest, did you use poles? Is that a race for poles or no? Because that's a question
You
I
can,
get a lot when I
yeah,
have athletes doing mountain races. So
yeah.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I personally don't use polls. I never have. I don't know, maybe at some point in my life I'll switch over to them, but I'm someone that like really struggles with like even eating, drinking as I'm suffering. So like you add something else for me to do and I'm like, I can't do this. Like,
Right.
you know how some people can like take pictures when they're running? Like
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't do any of it. So I keep it simple, but I'd say about 90% of people had polls out there. And bringing it back to Leadville too, everyone had polls. I think it was me and one other person that didn't have polls. But I mean, I find it just the reward versus the what I have to carry is not worth it for me.
Right.
But for most people, use them, love them, they need them. But you have to practice with them. And I don't practice with them. So the one time I've used the pole was that hurt when I broke my tailbone and I could not even like take a step. So one of my crew had a pole and I used it for the last lap around, which was 20 miles. And I found it so difficult to carry these. And I know it had to have helped me on the downs, but like I was a disaster, like trying to like carry these things. So I don't think I'll be using poles unless I find that I'm struggling up the climbs without them. But most people love them, and I just think that you need to get a good pair. You've got to practice with them, and if you can use them, like if that's something that you're interested in, there's nothing wrong with having that. It's to me, I just think it's more of a hindrance on everything else I've got to worry about. But if I see that them being helpful to me, I'll switch over. But for now, I'm too too overwhelmed with what I've got to carry to begin with.
Well, congratulations on that back-to-back great race.
Thank you.
What do you have coming next? Do you have anything soon or?
I'm actually getting to do rim to rim to rim with my dad and a bunch of cousins and friends. So I've kind of been tasked as the leader to get everyone out alive. So because I've done it, so we'll have the best time. And again, everyone's coming from Texas where it's flat and not elevated, and so I'm like, get on that stairmaster and just don't leave, like because that's the only thing you have to worry about is climbing, out of the canyon. So I get to do that in October or no, September coming up, and then I'm running Wild Wild West 50 mile in the September. No, yeah, October. There we go. But other than that, just kind of taking some much needed time to let my body heal. I probably won't run a step for another week and kind of just see what happens.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so has your dad done rim to rim to rim?
No, he hasn't. He was a big mountain guy, in his youth, and he's always been active and doing things and races, but this will be like probably the biggest thing he's ever done.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I know. So I'm like, I don't care how long it takes us. I just want to keep everyone safe. Like, let's just get through this, and it's going to be the most epic journey. So I'm super excited to do that with him.
Hey, that's so cool. And he was there to crew you at Badwater, right?
Yeah, yeah, he crewed and yeah, he's just the best and the most supportive and just loves this stuff. So I'm super thankful I get to do it with him.
Nice. I reached out to him in the middle of Badwater because
Yeah, he told me. Yeah.
I was like, how am I going to check on Lindsay? I don't know how to like.
There's no reception out there either. Like this year was extra bad. I don't know if like the weather played a role in it, but like there's usually a few spots where like you can send a text to people and like nothing until you got to Lone Pine, which is 120 miles into the course. So like, but he did tell me, he's like, oh, Loretta checked on you. I'm like, okay, good. I'm out of it. I don't remember. But now that you say that, I remember him telling me that.
Yeah, because I was like, how am I going to get like updates on her? And I'm like, I don't want to bug you. To just Facebook him and see if he responds. I didn't know, and he did.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, he's the best. So I know he's working really hard to. He doesn't want to, slow anyone down, but he won't. He's going to be just fine.
Maybe I should go on this journey. Maybe this sounds like one
yes. I can. Yes. I know. It's funny because it was going to be me, my dad, and my friend Myra. And then it's slowly like grown and like everyone I tell about it, which is wonderful. I'm like, the more people, the better, like the more camaraderie and like the more likelihood of everyone finishing that we have, like, people out there that want to be out there. So I'm like, yes, come, here's the date. Like, let's go.
Oh, that's so awesome. So
yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share before we go?
Just I'm super proud of all my athletes that are doing so well. Like, people are really just, how hard it is to wake up and train, and most people a morning run is their only option. Thankfully, I don't have that. Usually, the older I get, the harder it is to wake up those early mornings and do it. But I'm just really proud of everyone that's, taking it in stride and doing their workouts and wanting the best out of themselves, and are able to try and figure out how to manage training and life. And these people just never cease to amaze me. Like, you think that they'll stop coaching after they hit their race, and then I have people that they wanted to run a marathon, and then they finish it and they're like, okay, what about a 50? I'm like, all right, let's go. And then I've got maybe 3 people training for their first 100 coming up between Hennepin and Tunnel Hill. And like, it's just so cool to see everyone just really dialing in on and trusting the process. And that's the hardest thing to do, is trusting that you're going to be ready for it. So shout out to all of my athletes. They're doing so well. And thank you for, trusting me and also encouraging me on like, I'm always like, checking as soon as I'm done with my races, and I don't get any feedback from anyone from like the week. They're just like, congrats, congrats. I'm like, oh, I want to know how your run was. Like,
That's great. I mean, I want to
yeah,
kind of mimic that because I'm so proud of my athletes. I
yeah,
love tracking them. That's
yeah.
what like all weekend long it seems like is following races just to see
I
how.
know.
I'm just going to share one of the texts I got from one of my athletes that ran a 50 this last weekend, and
Okay.
it means a lot to get these messages too.
Yes.
So she's
Yeah.
so grateful for you. Thank you for answering my million questions leading up to the race and for all of your help over the years. You are wonderful at what you do and so passionate about seeing your athletes succeed. So that's
I love that.
love what we do. That's why we're doing
I
it.
love it.
Fun.
It's so true. It's so true. Like, you become like friends with these people that some of them you've never even met. And I just like, I'm rooting for everybody. Like, I'll check in on people that I know are struggling a little bit more than others, a little more often. And to just see them do things and to like make it a habit and to like see the excitement in them is just beyond. So I love that. And when they do, say thank you, which that, they do, it's like, oh my gosh, like, you don't hate me for making you run.
Exactly, exactly. It's amazing. And you know what? I mean, I think the thing that people don't know behind the scenes is how much like you and I communicate and
Yeah,
so our successes with our athletes or about our athletes
yeah,
or, looking for each other for
yeah.
guidance, which is really
Which
nice too.
is great. Yeah. And that's like the thing that I miss about, like, because I've been racing these stupid races like back to back so like frequently. Like, I'm trying to sleep as much as I can. So like, I've been missing out on like big conversations with people because my brain is just so tired. But I'm still waking up to messages from you and from my athletes, and I'm like, okay, this is just starting to feel back to normal. And I love communicating and always leaning on our fellow coaches and even just fellow athletes. Like, I mean, again, like, one of my athletes screwed me for Badwater because she wants to run it, and like, I just feel so thankful that I've got her as like a friend. She's, oh my gosh, 10 years younger than I am, so I see myself like 10 years ago, and it's just the best.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot
yeah,
for being on. It was good to see you.
yeah.
And
Thank you so much.
did you hear what I said?
Oh wait, what'd you say?
I hope you get rid of all of your itchies.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I start to, because I had that shot yesterday, but I start to see it like looking red, so I'm like, gotta go get that medicine.
Because we pay for being in ultra races, right? You
I
never
know.
come out with.
No, seriously, and I knew what I was going to come out with this time, but I didn't realize it was going to be so bad. So, but here we are.
It's great to see you. I'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. Talk to you later. Bye, Loretta.